my number one takeaway from our meal, and I think is an important part about mastery that I wanted to hear from you, is anyone can do it, right? This is not some sort of elusive thing that only 5 people in the world are born with. It's not just Napoleon and Da Vinci and Einstein.
Right.
So start with that. Tell me a little bit about the backstory there.
Well, I maintain that the brain evolved a certain way over millions and millions of years for a definite purpose, and that essentially we are hardwired for the potential for mastery. If we go through a field and we learn medicine or whatever, after a while we get so much information that the brain can kind of slow down and get sort of overwhelmed by the chaos of the things that it has to learn. You know that in photography or any field.
Sure.
Mastery, you get to the point where you have so much experience, so much knowledge, you've been practicing for so long that you almost don't have to think. The brain, there's so many connections going on underneath the surface. It's happening so quickly that you've mastered the complexity of your field, and ideas are just coming out of you from nowhere. And the brain is meant for this because millions of years ago, our ancestors had to struggle with a very complex environment. They had to survive, and they mastered their environment, their knowledge. They had a feel for what was going to happen, for the animals they were hunting, etc. Your brain is wired for that. It wants to happen. It wants to go that direction, and I'm going to show you how to do it in the book.
See, that's what I feel. We'll talk about this a little bit more later.
Yeah.
I feel the same about like creativity.
Yeah.
Like, the brain is inherently a creative thing, and there are people through some sort of subset of our culture, like you're creative, you're not, you're meant to be an accountant, you're meant to be a movie star, you're meant to be a chef or whatever, and all of those things that I believe there's a deep-seated creativity in them. And we do see the word creativity popping up more these days. I feel like it's starting to be a zeitgeist term, which I really appreciate. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I want to back up on how you arrived at this book, because power and seduction, and then what brought you to mastery.
Well, I'd been working prior to writing books. I'd been working in Hollywood. I'd worked in magazines. I've had every kind of conceivable job.
You were just telling me upstairs about when you worked at a detective agency.
I worked at a detective agency. I worked in restaurants and hotels, in construction, you know. But that's typical for a writer. That's called living. You know, you learn from life.
Got it.
But I've been in so many environments, and I know that we humans are incredibly social creatures. We're the preeminent social animal on the planet. And so many of our interactions in the office or whatever, they're things that are not taught in the university or in school, or your parents don't teach you, about social interactions, about the rules that go on, about people's egos that you inadvertently upset or step on, and then 3 months later you're fired and you don't know why. All that kind of crap that everybody deals with and nobody writes about. It was driving me crazy.
Or talks about it, or teaches it, or there's there's literally no.
It's like a hidden secret. Oh no, we're all wonderful born angels and this never goes on. No. So I was so kind of angry about it, particularly in Hollywood, where you've got the most devious people. The sharks are all out there.
There might be some Hollywood people looking at it.
I love you dearly, but you know. Anyway, you inspired the 48 Laws of Power. So I wanted to uncover these rules that go on where powerful people are using them. And I know it because I've seen it. So that was my line that's got me into power. And I have this belief that the world we live in, it's not about being aggressive and pushing people around. The people who really succeed are the soft people, the indirects, the Bill Clinton types. That was seduction. So I wanted to write a book about seducing a woman, seducing your colleagues, seducing a nation politically, seducing in a marketing sense. And then because these books are very strategic oriented, the next book was about strategy and warfare and how you can actually learn from these classic maneuvers of a Napoleon. And that's just sort of been the train that's led me along. But I've noticed that with all of these different weird, interesting people I've been living with for the past 16 years, that there was this common trait that they all had. They had arrived at a point where they had what I call a fingertip feel for what they were doing. They had mastered their field, and I wanted to be able to write about that.
Yeah, to me that's fascinating, and the show typically, it's really like the first part of your book is about dispelling myths, and there's several myths that you dispel.
Right.
And I think a lot of I know personally that I was stuck behind some of these myths, going, "How am I ever going to find what I want to do in life? There's only a handful of geniuses actually make anything good in the world.
Right.
I'm neither of those things. I don't know what the hell I want to do, and I'm not a genius. So, am I effed? Like, what's
Right.
So talk to me about those things, because I think this is part of that sort of concrete where you got to get through the bullshit to realize that there's something there, and it's not just there for some people, but it's there for everyone.
Well, the myth that
Is this your coffee or mine?
That's mine, but you can
Damn,
go ahead.
can I have a cup of coffee? Thanks, Norton. I'll take a cup of coffee.
The main myth is that mastery is all about some kind of brain power, that it's an intellectual quality, but it's not. Mastery is an emotional quality. You are so deeply interested in what you're studying that you are learning faster, that you can handle people's criticism, that you're more patient, that you want to study this field. It's not a job, okay? So that's the main thing that all of these masters share in common. It's not that they were born with a bigger brain or a higher IQ. They love what they do. So I maintain that every single human being born on this planet has the same thing in their head. They hear a voice when they're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. I can take anybody in the audience and I could find what that is. You were drawn to something when you were a child. Naturally, it's pre-verbal. For me, it had to do with history, had to do with sports and strategy and writing and literature. I don't know why I was drawn to that. I wasn't drawn to building things with my hands like my father was. Something inside of me was calling, as a voice, calling me to that. And the problem that people have is, as they get older, they lose contact with that voice. They start hearing their parents saying, you know, you need to go into something that's lucrative. You need to become a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. You start hearing friends saying, this is a cool profession, that's a cool profession. Teachers start turning you off from learning because school, quite frankly, can be a big drag, and they're trying to teach you things that you're not interested in. And slowly, as you get older, you lose touch with that voice inside that was calling you to something that you love, and you take a career path that wasn't meant for you. You don't realize it.
I knew that one very well.
Okay, you realized it, but some people don't until they're 40 and they're screwed because they're in a job they hate and they haven't learned the skills necessary to make the change. You don't want to go down that path. You want to follow and get in touch with that inner voice that's calling you to some field. And all the people who are really successful, you or Steve Jobs or whomever in history, they're the ones that hear that and follow it all the way to mastery.
Beautiful. Speaking of mastery, do you mind if, I think we've got your book trailer queued up, which is something that I found was great. It's a great introduction to some of the stuff that you're just mentioning.
Yeah.
We'll come back to it as soon as this trailer's over, but take a look at the book trailer for Robert's book, Mastery.
The path to great power is simple. It's the path followed by all masters, past and present, from Renaissance artists to the entrepreneurs of Silicon Valley. Now, from Robert Greene, best-selling and internationally acclaimed author of The 48 Laws of Power, The Art of Seduction, and The 33 Strategies of War, comes a masterwork on becoming a master. Here's the path to mastery. Enter the career path that suits your uniqueness, that sparks your deepest curiosity. Go through an apprenticeship where you master the necessary skills, learn from mentors, become socially adept. Stay focused and fluid. Know your environment inside and out. Now, creative powers will come to you, as will the command and mastery of your chosen craft. Anyone can follow these steps. The fruit of over 20,000 hours of thinking, researching, and writing on power and excellence, Mastery reveals how to become exceptional at whatever you do, how to become the best. Achieving it takes a lifetime, but your path starts with Mastery by Robert Greene.
That's pretty good. Okay, so let's go revisit this idea that we departed on before we went to the trailer, which is, all right, everyone's got this thing, right?
They do.
It's the little voice inside your head, but how do you know the thing? Because most of the people that I know, and I end up, like you, I'm very, very fortunate to have found the thing that I wanted to spend all my time doing, taking pictures and making films, and I've been obsessive about it. but when other people see someone who's found their thing, I think more than people wanting to know, oh, how do you take this picture or make this film or whatever they want, how did you find what you wanted to do? What did you listen to? So
Right.
that's the key. So help me and help the world with that.
Wow.
It's a big question. How much time do you have, right?
Well, first of all, the material is there. You've got the raw material, okay? I tell people in my sort of counseling sessions that I do
Not literally counseling sessions.
literally counseling sessions.
He's a therapist as well.
Now, when you're looking at the newspaper, you're on the internet, what are the subjects that really hit you in the gut? Like, you have to follow those. You're really deeply interested in them. What are the subjects or the activities that kind of repel you? You don't like to do that. Oftentimes you have to find out what you hate, and that's the process that you go through in life. I hated working for big companies. I hated working in journalism where what I wrote didn't last very long. I hated working in Hollywood. These are very important lessons. You have to listen to that. So basically it's getting a little bit in touch with yourself. And it's not a question of, oh, I wake up and now I realize I was meant to be a fireman or a teacher. It's not like that kind of banal thing. These are things that naturally fit me. When I do them, I'm happier. I feel like I'm kind of going in the right direction. All right, now I'm going to craft a career path that more or less will incorporate that. And I will, in the exploring that path, whether it's writing or medicine or whatever, I'll find which little side path actually suits me the best. But you want to be heading at least in that right direction.
Yeah, the thing that I feel like I learned about myself in that process is I felt like I thought that I knew what I wanted to do, but what it turned out to be is what everybody else wanted me to do.
Exactly.
And that was like, if you're going to be successful, you're a
Exactly.
hardworking kid, then you're gonna go be a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, or those are things that are successful and are. So, and I don't blame the folks that were saying this is what I should do, or like I don't think they had it out for me.
Right.
But the hardest thing for me to get over was not listening to those people.
Right.
And I was like in my late teens, early 20s, and I was still, I was going to bound to medical school.
Right.
And had to quit that. I was in a PhD program in the philosophy of art for 2 years, and had to quit that. And quitting those things, I reference myself as a quitter all the time. Is that not hard? Like, I found it to be a huge pain to quit and to react against people as in the negative instead of in the positive.
Well, there has to be some pain involved. So mastery, I think success in life is never going to be painless. So you're learning that was a very good thing. But I tell people that it really comes down to fear. So you're afraid of leaving this job that you have because you got a good paycheck and you don't want to experiment now and you don't want to try something that might be more suited to you, but God knows where your paycheck is going to come from. But I'm telling you, you have more to fear 10 years, 20 years down the line if you're in a field that doesn't excite you. Because we live in a world now where things are changing so quickly. Your career path is really altering. You're not going to be working at the same place for very long. And once your career changes and there's shifts going on in the world, you're going to be screwed because you don't know how to adjust. You're doing something that you don't love. You should be afraid of that. That's what you should be afraid of, what's going to happen to you in 10 years. Don't worry now about the paycheck in 2 years. Money will come to you if you follow what you love to some degree. I mean, you have to be realistic.
Right.
But the thing is, we live in a world now, finally, we've thrown off the shackles of hundreds of years of this existence where only a few people in the world could have power. We now live in a new, I call it a ferociously democratic era, where you have the ability to follow what makes you strange, weird, unique, combine it with all kinds of interesting skills that you've learned via the internet or whatever. This is the time where you can be doing it. So, celebrate that and move with the times.
Yeah, my personal journey, if I can share a little bit more about that, was I was told that it was suggested that I do all these other things, and quitting them, I felt that with every time I quit something, I actually gained a little bit of power.
Right.
I gained a little bit of awareness. I gained a little bit of self-confidence. And then when I was brutally honest with myself about what it is that I wanted to do, I instantly had a change of mental state.
Right.
Like, instantly. And the little miracle was that I was always on my path. I was always willing to do whatever it took, and little hurdles that came they were really meant to keep everybody else out. And I either thought I could sustain the pain, I could outlast them, I could get over it, around it, or through it, because what was on the other side was the next step for me. And it was instant, it was an overnight shift when I actually said, you know what, I got to be honest with myself, this is what I want to do.
Well, you know, pain is a good thing. If you're having pain in your life...
Little pain never hurt anybody, right?
No, it's a good thing. Frustration and pain is good.
Okay.
It means your body, your mind, your soul is telling you that something is wrong. Physical pain, your body's telling you something is wrong with your foot, whatever it is. Mental pain is telling you something is wrong with your life. And you've got to listen to it and reevaluate where you're headed. So actually, if you're not feeling pain, if you're kind of in this haze, that's almost worse. So you should be grateful that something isn't working out in your life, because now you have the opportunity to learn what will work.
Yeah, that's the sort of the motivator, the activator.
Oh, definitely. What you don't want to do is, let's say you're pursuing a path, you don't want to suddenly give up everything that you've developed in your 20 years of job experience.
Right. So you're not going to nuke your family life. You're not going to
No, and if you've been a lawyer for 20 years, you're not suddenly going to grow your hair long and become a rock star or something like that. You got to work with what you have, you know.
Okay.
So you've developed some skills that are interesting or that are valuable over those 20 years, hopefully. Because if you haven't developed any skills, then there's nothing I don't think we can do for you.
Right. Okay.
And you want to find a way to adapt them to something that's more interesting to you, you know. And you know, I can work with that person at an individual level to kind of find that. I had a friend, she was a lawyer, she hated it, and she knew she wanted to be a writer. So she had the guts to quit her job in her late 30s and go into writing, but she wrote about legal issues. That was her first step, was to get a job writing about the law. And then that blossomed into now writing about other things. And now she's writing a novel, a courtroom novel, and things like that. And now soon she'll be able to write about whatever she wants. But she realized that that her real passion was.
Yeah, so you're not necessarily like jumping to the other side of the ocean, for example. You're taking baby steps, but each of those baby steps would be on your on your path.
But you know it. When you do something that's in your wheelhouse, that's in your powerhouse,
it's so,
you know it. You know, like, it doesn't feel like work. You're happy. You feel like some creative thing is suddenly born in you. You're like, we're dying, and now you're awake, and your mind is awake. You know it. And you can feel it. So it's a matter of kind of looking inside yourself and being a little honest about what that is that you really love.
Got it. I think this is it's an interesting pivot.
Focused on the here and now. And it's very hard and unnatural for us to look at the larger picture of our lives. Like, where are we really headed? And so if you're afraid of connecting with it because it means that now you have to do something different and you don't know how you're going to make money, what I tried and I said earlier, you should be really more afraid of what's going to happen to you in 5 years when you start disengaging from that job. And then now you're 33, 34, and suddenly there are these kids coming up who are 23, 24. They're smart little whippersnappers who understand the internet and things that you don't understand. They're going to replace you. They're going to replace you because your heart's not in it. You're not paying attention to the things going on. You have to be afraid of that. And if you're afraid of that, you'll understand that following the path where you're bringing out your uniqueness, where you're really trying to express what makes you different, is what really power lies in this world. I could go through a million examples of people in business, in the arts, and even in sports. The ones that really make it are the ones that bring out their weirdness in the end, and they're not afraid of it. So you shouldn't be afraid of it if you really want to achieve something. See these common traits that what I call masters have. It transcends their field. And essentially it is they have, after so many years of experience, a field, what I call a high-level intuition for their field. They can anticipate the next trend. You're a Steve Jobs, and you know that this is the future of computers. It's not computers, it's the smartphone. You have, where does that idea come from? So I wanted to look beyond everybody's individual field and see what it is about the brain that's in common. And I think it's that they have assimilated so much knowledge about their field that they don't have to think anymore. Ideas are coming to them. I know probably in your field as a photographer, and it's
whatever these things were. And is that also universal? This sort of the global trend, like a Steve Jobs has, for example.
Yeah, several things are going on. I call it like it's a feeling like you're on the top of the mountain. You've been climbing up this mountain through your 10, 15 years, and at the top, you now have this complete command of the field, and you're able to see what's going on over there and over there and over there, and you're connected and look ahead. Excuse me. Look ahead and see where your field is going. You also have transparency to yourself. You're able to look into your own mind and see how your mind is working and anticipate, and you can see your head filling up with these ideas, and you're almost like looking inside, sort of you're transparent, your own process is transparent. The thing that people need to know is it's an incredibly great feeling. It's not like being a master is a workaholic. You have to, it's so boring and tedious, the 15,000 hours, the 20,000 hours. When you get there,
I thought it was 10,000. When did it just double?
I think this is about what happens to people when they push even past the 10,000 hours.
Okay.
Like the brain shifts to another mode. I call this the highest level of intelligence a human being can reach. It's really a great feeling. I mean, I'm not saying I have it every day. I have it.
I'll tell you that you're a master, so that you can talk about
thank
it.
Thank you. But it's really worth something to aim at.
Yeah.
You don't feel as tired. You're really excited. Ideas are coming to you. It's sort of the ultimate position of power.
Say you want to be a cook. It's the most important thing. You want to be a chef. You're really attracted to food. Grew up on a farm. Always had a value. Parents sent you off to college. Felt lost. Go back. You need to apprentice. So walk us through what that would look like.
Well, the thing is about the apprenticeship phase is it's a new aspect in your life. So what you learned in school and at home, just throw it all out. Just throw it into a garbage can. It's useless.
Thanks, Mom. Okay.
It's just useless. Now you're going into your real education. And you have to have a different kind of mindset and a different skill set. In this new world, you have to be able to observe people around you. You want to learn the rules. So if it's cooking, you want to attach yourself to some great chef that you admire, and you want to watch that person in action and be just a great observer. And you're not just observing the basic things about how to cut, you're just getting a feel for everything about them.
Everybody who reports to the chef, everybody who he or she works with.
Yeah. It's just how their energy, how they respond to other people, how they interact, and the skill level. If you can learn to quiet your ego and not be about trying to get attention, get money right away, become a great cook, you're just about learning. It's all about learning. Your 20s should be your apprenticeship, and it should be about learning as many skills as possible. It should not be about making a 6-figure paycheck or getting on the cover of a newspaper or whatever. In fact, success too early on is the worst thing that can happen to you. You're learning, you're absorbing as much information, as many skills, and also that pre-verbal stuff about what makes that master chef so good at it. You learn, if you're a tennis player, you watch somebody hitting a killer serve, and that guy can't explain to you how he makes that great serve, but watching him, you can get a feel for how it happens. Your body wants to imitate. You just are in this sort of Zen mode of learning, absorbing, being egoless, developing skill, observing, and slowly making the soil rich with knowledge and experience so that you're going to slowly awaken the creative energy in the brain.
Yeah, I've seen the rest of that phase rather quickly here.
Well, it's like a soil that you're throwing seeds in there because of all the things that you're learning.
Okay.
And towards the end of that period, the great danger that you'll have in an apprenticeship is you just become a lifelong apprentice, and all you do is learn rules. And you're so afraid of stepping out and experimenting and asserting now's the time to start asserting who you are a little bit. So you reach a point in the apprenticeship phase late in it where you start to take on your own project, to maybe write your own paper or whatever it is. If you're a cook, you start preparing your own meals. Maybe you go start your own restaurant. You're testing the waters to see if you've learned enough, if you've got the resiliency to take the criticism and the feedback from people. So you slowly start moving out. You're leaving home, and now you're going to start asserting who you are and what makes you different. We don't often have the opportunity. I didn't have that, great writer that I could attach myself to. You couldn't find that photographer. So you got to do the best of what you have, and sometimes there's an advantage to it. You know, so you get to pick and choose the Basquiats, the Warhols, the Man Rays, the people maybe that you really respected, and you can learn from them instead of some bullshit photographer who's going to teach you really boring,
How to sweep the
uncreative
studio,
things.
yeah.
So you turn that into an advantage, and I did too. I read the books of the people that I really love, but I still think if you could find that
Sure.
great mentor, the person that fits you, and I talk about how to find someone that fits, because not anybody's going to be your mentor.
Right.
It can be a great thing, you know, because we humans are designed to learn by watching somebody else do what they're doing. It's a natural fit for us. If you can't do it, you know, there are other ways you can do it on your own.
Sure. Okay, so we're in the apprenticeship phase. Then we transcend out of apprenticeship into this sort of what you call in your book, I think it's the creative active phase, where you're actually doing work. And this is maybe when you start you in restaurant, you fall on your face, or you make your own dish. You're sort of exerting yourself a little bit, right? And then there's some ego issues at play.
Right.
Are there not? So talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, the thing I try and impress is creativity isn't what you think it is, and the brain isn't what you think the brain is. The brain is essentially a dual processing system. I don't mean to throw out too much jargon to you.
No, this is cool.
But
I know,
basically,
my Mac Pro has 2 core processors, I think.
okay, it's similar to the
Maybe
Mac
it has
Pro.
8. Actually, this is too jargony. We're going to have to go. No.
Okay.
Okay, I get it.
Well, what
though.
that means is the brain works by comparing and contrasting anything that comes into it. So something you perceive, the brain automatically compares it to something else that happened, and then, oh, this is a dangerous thing, or this is an opportunity. You want to feed that brain, that natural process, with so much information, so much knowledge and experience, that the brain naturally starts making all of these connections and contrasting and discover. You're feeding what it naturally wants to do with as much information and richness as possible, and that natural creativity of the human brain will come alive. It will happen. It happens for every single person. I have a woman I interviewed who's one of the contemporary masters, Temple Grandin, born with autism. It happened to her. It doesn't matter if you're born with some disadvantage, or if you're poor, or if you're male, female, or whatever. It will happen if you go through this process. The ego stuff that you mentioned is you start having some success and you get conservative. You're not exploring. Creativity is a constant exploration. Your mind is open. You're trying this and that. You're not settling in. Steve Jobs said the brain wants to settle into grooves, like the grooves of a record, and just go round and round and round. That can happen to you if you start having success and you think, wow,
I got to preserve this success or something.
or I've got magic, and I just have to keep doing what I did. I have to take those same photographs with the same lighting over and over again. And you see a lot of artists get into that trap.
Yeah.
What were the lessons? Well, I determined that this guy had a fearlessness. And it's not a fearlessness of bullets and violence and policemen. It was a fearlessness towards life. So he's going to try whatever it takes, and he's not afraid of failing. He's not afraid of being different. He's not afraid of being alone. He's not afraid of death itself, because that bullet, and you can see it, went right through there and nearly killed him. You know, so this guy's fearlessness made him who he is, and that's what the book is about.
It's a very powerful book.
Fear is not a bad thing. It's like now you have something to overcome and handle. If you had no fear, you would like go chase that lion, or you would go jump off a cliff, you'd die. There's a reason for it.
Okay.
But fear can be very debilitating, so you want to see the fear that you have and literally confront it. And the thing that is so interesting to me, and I think everybody can really identify with it, when you actually go through something like an earthquake, like you're so afraid of an earthquake or a storm or whatever it is, or some terrible natural disaster, when you're actually in it, you can handle it. The human body was made, we have all these resources, we can handle a dangerous, difficult situation. In fact, our adrenaline starts pumping, and we start realizing we have powers we didn't even realize we have. You've got to put yourself a little bit out there in order to realize that you have resources for handling the fear. So The worst thing is, what you have to be afraid of is never trying something. That's where you're going to really fail. The worst failure is not trying something. If you try something and you fail, you've learned from it. As far as, feeding your family and all of the other problems.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of a common, common, I'll say excuse because we're in this conversation. It's
Right.
It's a common reasons I can't do that because I've got X, Y, and Z. And
No, you can do it. And I show you in the 50th law, it's not a matter of you quitting your job and not supporting your family and letting them starve. You're realistic, but you first confront the fact that you're afraid, and then you make a path. Your path is toward a better career, and in 3 years, I'm going to quit this job flipping burgers, and I'm going to do this other thing that, in the meantime, I'm now at night going to study. Okay, so you're clear about what you have to do, and you're not afraid to take it, and you set yourself a deadline and a goal. In 2 years, I'm going to make that break, and I'll be able to feed my family, etc. But you first have to be aware of the problem, that if fear rules you, you're
not going anywhere.
You're not going anywhere.
Yeah, I think that's the idea of being able to transition across things in human nature, across jobs, across relationships, careers.
Right.
I think it's like it seems to me to be the missing link, and that's what more than anything I get asked. How did you be a photographer? How did you
Right.
Start Creative Live? Or like and whatever those things are, they were very, very deliberate, and none of them involved me juggling all of the balls that I had with Live Your Life and like just letting them all hit the ground and gonna go try and juggle over here.
Right.
It was every time it was a combination of I had to throw a couple way over here and then grab one and throw it up.
Right.
And then pretty soon you get all of your balls over here juggling. And that transition happens between 5 p.m. and 2 a.m.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And there has to be this, you have to want it bad enough to
Right.
put in the time and the energy in that phase. Am I alone, or is that the natural process?
No, if you don't want something, you won't ever do it. We're kind of driven by the necessity to do things. It's going to follow in the footsteps of other people. If you've come from a disadvantaged background, or you're facing problems, or you're not happy with your career, it's actually a blessing in disguise. You're now motivated to get out of there and to work for yourself and to figure it all out. So it's better to have those kind of motivating factors in your life than to have everything going easy. If everything's going easy, something's probably wrong.
Got it. See, they translate really well in the same way that Steve Jobs' experience is not different than Einstein's, is not different than LeBron James.
Right.
Talk to me about your creative process.
Well, writing is probably the least exciting, sexy of all the arts, Like, it's not like dancing or music or photography. You're alone, you're in your office.
You can be in your underwear.
You can be in your underwear, but you're alone a lot. You're not getting feedback. And it can be really tedious,
And competitive, because there's a lot of people who want.
Oh, everybody wants to be a writer.
Right.
And you're staring at a blank page. And, God damn it, what do I write? It can be torture. But the worst thing that happens to you, you got to create joy in the process. So it's the same thing really for everything. If everything is mapped out, if you have an outline of exactly what you're going to write for your book or your screenplay or whatever, you kill the joy. So now you're just sitting there at your desk, hitting the dots, A to B to C to D, and it's soulless, and everyone will know it. The book won't work because you can. I say you can feel the energy that someone puts into it. If they're feeling it alive in the music or the photography, it translates into the product. So
I fully believe that, for what it's worth. I
Okay.
believe every little neuron is on edge. If you're around someone and they give a shit about what they're doing, they care deeply about
Right.
making prints or whatever it is they do, you know it.
Right.
And when you're around, and it doesn't matter if it's a musician or a graffiti artist, a scientist, a mathematician. If they're fired up, you know it.
Yeah, and it translates into the end product. And we can tell when someone's doing something for money, I believe. And it might sell right now, but it doesn't last. Anyway, what I do is I trick myself into enjoying the process.
I've got to get some of this. This is going to be good.
So I don't know where I'm headed all the time. I have a more or less direction. I'm writing about Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, I can't go off into some tangent, but I don't know exactly what I'm going to say. I don't know exactly where I'm going, and I let the moment kind of happen, right? And then something surprising occurs. And I write a sentence and I go, wow, I never actually consciously thought of that, but that's actually an interesting idea. Where did that come from? I'm willing to experiment in the moment and be open to what I call serendipity, randomness. Anything random you want to incorporate into your creative process. You don't want to start off saying, I'm doing this and I'm going to get there. You've got to have space to explore, experiment, go weird, have things happen that you didn't expect. Not too long. It's not like it's like here instead of like that,
right.
you know? And so that's one of the main ways that I kind of trick myself into enjoying the process.
Okay, but is it your position that creativity is the natural state of the brain?
I definitely think it's the natural state of the brain. I can prove it's the natural state of the brain. Read my book and you'll see that. I talk about it this way. Children are born with creative minds. So I call that the original mind. And if you've ever been around children, you know what I'm talking about. They come up with the silliest, most bizarre associations between ideas that are naturally creative. The brain is naturally wanting to associate things. And then what happens is you become conventional. I call it the conventional mind. And you lose that original spontaneity and you just go around in circles. What happens is when you go through an apprenticeship and you learn everything that you need and you get skill and experience, you're going to awaken that creativity that you had as a child. You're going to keep that childlike spirit, like an ember of it is still alive, it's still burning in you. You haven't killed the fire. And now that you've got all that experience, the fire will kindle. And you know, it's weird. I met these like 9 contemporary masters that I interview in
the book, yeah.
And they all have that kind of childlike quality. You can see it in them, you know? You can see the little boy or girl in them as an adult. They didn't lose it. There's something, you know, you can picture them as a 4 or 5-year-old being so excited. Children are naturally curious about the world, and the worst thing that happens to us as adults is we lose our curiosity. We think we know everything. You know, we no longer have that hunger to learn. And masters and creative people keep that natural curiosity. They don't feel like they know everything, and they're so hungry to learn something, and that keeps you naturally young and creative.
If you've lost it, for the folks in the audience and out there, how do you get it back?
Well, first of all, you know, I have all sorts of strategies in the book. I have 5 creative strategies that I elaborate. And what I say is, you're saying is, if you've gone to the point of putting in all those hours in an apprenticeship and you've lost your creative spark at that point?
Yeah, or if you maybe took the wrong path and you are in that job and you, like, where's this creative spirit that Robert's talking about? I want to drive home the same way every day because I know it's the fastest point from A to B. I want to see the movie that I watched last weekend because I know the ending.
If that's your motivation, you can't be creative, right? So if you're this gentleman Han, who's now can't be a fisherman, but he can now start his own business, he's going to find, because of the daunting quality of having to start his own business, he's going to get creative. Okay, your fear is keeping you from a circumstance where you're going to have to be creative. But you can only be creative if you have, the soil is filled with all of this experience and practice. If I wanted to be a doctor tomorrow or a golfer or whatever, I'm not going to be creative. I have to go through the 10 years of developing to get to the point where I can be creative. But the main thing is, the mind is a muscle, just like your legs or your arms. And that muscle tightens. It tightens over time. As you get older, you get the same ideas, you hear the same voice, you repeat what you thought worked once before. It gets tighter and tighter and tighter, and you can see old people, they say the same things, the same stories, their ideas are just rigidified, they're not young anymore. You gotta loosen up the mind. And I have exercises in there, if you've gotten to that point where you feel stuck and blocked, here's how you loosen up the mind. You know, go back to what I call negative capability, where you don't think you know everything. You look at the world from a different perspective. I had written the first 4 chapters, or 6 chapters, and the publisher suddenly came to me and said, all right, Robert, you're really late in delivering this book. We're cracking the whip. You have 11 weeks to finish this book, or we're gonna do something nasty. And I was like, whoa, I've got like almost half the book to write, the most complicated chapters. I can't do it in 11 weeks. The fear factor kicked in. Instead, I said, all right, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to try it. I'm going to do something I've never done before. I'm actually going to write like a fiend, and I'm going to make that 11 weeks. So I mixed up how I normally would react. My normal reaction, call my agent, say, no fucking way we're doing this. We're going to Simon & Schuster, screw you. No, all right, I'm going to try it. And I tell you, I have never had a better experience in my life. Those 11 weeks are like I was like on a high. By the time I reached week 10, I thought I was God himself or herself. Ideas were coming out of nowhere. I had pressurized the brain so highly, and I was writing about intuition and I was experiencing intuition. But what the key to it was, I wasn't afraid to try this totally different thing, which was to write under the most insane deadline, you know? So that was sort of the lesson I learned on that.
Amazing. The book is Mastery. It's by Mr. Robert Greene, author of 48 Laws of Power, The 50th Law, The Art of Seduction, 33 Strategies of War. Is that what it is?
That's right.
Has a lot of books. This one is my favorite. Check it out. You can get it damn near anywhere.